Over to you.
Hey, hi everybody. Uh, my name is David Giller, and this is my beautiful wife, Elaine. And we are happy to be hosting Mynoo's Age of Brilliance session tonight. Exciting.
Yes, very exciting.
And
All about freedom.
tonight is we open the portal of freedom. Yes. And activate the 12 pillars of regenerative and eternal freedom. 12 pillars. You get six, I get six. Anyway, with our joy to introduce Mynoo Maryel for this evening's amazing wisdom. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was very exciting that is a portal as well of the age of brilliance. So,
Very
um,
time
very
subject.
timely. Yes. Okay, let's begin. Let's begin. So, freedom is, there's a song which is, it's just another word for nothing left to lose. So if we just take that, freedom is just another word, nothing left to lose, you know, what could be possible? So I sort of unpacked that a little bit as I was preparing for this session, and I was working with my mentor, Ellen, on this. And these are the big messages around freedom. Freedom is really not holding on to anything, letting it all come to you. It's going where you never dared to go before. Freedom is not hanging on to our successes or our accomplishments, acknowledging them so that they are anchored as an inner knowing, and then keeping going, moving forward. The bottom line is we are born free, we are free, and always will be free. Like the song, Born free as the wind blows, as free as the grass grows. So today's session is about these 12 pillars that you can use. The fact that you're born free anyway, and you are free. Freedom can't be given to you and it cannot be taken away from you. Other people can come and encroach your space, and even that doesn't have to take your freedom away. That can feel inconvenient, and have you rise up to communicate that to them. And you can do all of that when you know that you always are, always were, and always will be free. So these 12 pillars enable you to release, restore, and resurge. So I'm talking about release, restore, and resurge. So there are three phases of this transmission around freedom. And for each pillar, we will look at each one of these. This whole entire Age of Brilliance series, in fact, all of these transmission series, have really brought me up close and personal to understand the power and the nuance hidden in the word itself. So, release. Release is dissolving that architecture of inner bondage. Release is dissolving the architecture of inner bondage. There is no force in release. It is an illumination. Illumination are insights that you can act on. And when you are able to see something clearly, it cannot imprison you anymore. And that is what the dissolving of the architecture of inner bondage actually means. And hence, you've heard me talk about the power tool of acknowledgement. And that's because it enables release. Restoration. Restoration is returning to that original inner authority. So, what does that actually mean in practice? Restoration is a return of self-governance. When you are operating from self-governance, your nervous system, emotions, thoughts, and actions, they come back to coherence naturally. And finally, resurgence. Resurgence is freedom that is lived as a creative power. Resurgence is freedom that is expressed as a matter of your choice. So resurgence is freedom expressed through choice, through love, through standing in your truth as an act of service, without self-betrayal. I come across so many people, they are in the act of service. And they go into it with a have to, need to, must. And every time you have a have to, need to, must do, should or should not, you are actually indulging in self-betrayal. So the creative power starts to get diminished very rapidly. And when you start losing that creative power, that is the start of an acceptance, a journey of acceptance. And it is a journey of accepting that you're losing your freedom. So today we are going to talk about the 12 pillars, and any one of these pillars can really enable you to reclaim it. So let's look at the 12 pillars of regenerative and eternal freedom. Each pillar is actually not a lesson. Each pillar is a liberation in its own way. And it was very interesting as I was writing these up late last night. Even as I talk about some of these pillars, you'll say, how can that be a pillar to regenerative and eternal freedom? And we'll find out. So the first pillar is fear. Fear is a pillar of regenerative and eternal freedom. And what makes it that? We're going to go do a little deeper dive into it. What happens here is where fear goes from, initially it's about protection. So it goes from being a protector to actually becoming a prisoner of it. The protector aspect is activated when you expand fears as an acronym for false expectations appearing real. False expectations appearing real. When you go into expectations that don't even exist, but you make them have the power, it takes a lot of your own vital life force away. And it is that because your vital, you literally turn on the tap of leaking your vital life force, your chi or your prana, as they call it. So there you are, feeling more and more depleted every time you engage in any one of those or multiple of those false expectations, because there is no reality to it, there are no roots, those expectations aren't even stable, they start to multiply. And as they start to multiply, your tap, which was just dripping before, starts to get turned on even more strongly and very rapidly. You're starting to feel weaker and weaker and weaker, and you become a prisoner of these false expectations appearing real. So, how do you release this? Release fear as an imagined threat. It's a very simple practice. There are some of you who've done my work on freedom, fear to freedom. So, what I say is, okay, given that you know fear is false expectations appearing real, let's acknowledge all of those expectations. I'm not good enough, or it could be that there is some imagined threat from someone. It hasn't happened, but you're imagining it and you made that imagination so real and so vivid that you're stopped as a result of that. Whatever it might be, the moment you start to acknowledge all of these expectations, and if you list them out on a piece of paper and just put a big cross, just a line across it, acknowledging that these are all false expectations. But because I make them be real, fear goes from being a protector to me becoming a prisoner of these expectations. And just that act alone releases fear as an imagined threat. It's not a threat in the first place. But by giving it that the meaning that is attached to these expectations, it starts to become a threat. But it's something you imagined. And sometimes that imagination has got very strong footing because it's grounded in experiences that you might have had in the past about the same situation. I mean, even something like, going on top of a cliff and thinking about, of course I'll be afraid to jump off it. Well, nobody's asking you to jump off anything. I'm on top of the cliff. And what if I was a bird and I could fly? And I'm not a bird. I can't fly. So I'm just going to stand here and really enjoy the wind, the breeze, the vista. There's no fear in that.
Mynoo, hi.
Yes.
So what about something like worry? Because worry is something that people, like really stress, creates tremendous anxiety
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stress somebody out. And like I always like my definition of worry is when you try to jump a hurdle that may or may not even exist before you get to it. And that
Yeah.
is like the same kind of a thing what you're talking about right now as the first pillar.
Yeah. So, a worry is a reaction, an emotional reaction to false expectations appearing real, right? And you may have heard me say this before, that reaction is a reactivation of an emotional trigger. So when you convert your false expectations into a reaction of worry, you may not even express it. It may just be an internal, an inward thing. You have reactivated an emotional trigger, which at some point made you feel really constricted, deeply constricted. So you're absolutely right in that it is not that it may or may not exist. It actually doesn't exist, does not exist. But sometimes we
Mm.
worry so much that our worry is then becomes a message for the universe that, oh, he loves to worry.
Uh-huh.
Well, let's give him a few things to worry
Well,
about.
and also could actually create, you
That's
know,
what happens. You land up creating them.
create it
Yeah,
to happen.
yeah. And by the way, when I got this, so let's say you're worried about someone you love deeply. Okay, like with children, we are parents. As parents, we often worry about our children, right? It's quite a normal, natural phenomenon that occurs. I often say to people, well, once you understand that worry is a phenomenon that you've created, it's not real. It's a reaction to false expectations appearing real. So you're reactivating some emotional trigger that is anchored in the past, and you're running that movie over and over and over again. Your child is actually free and happy to do whatever they're doing. By running that movie in your head, you're literally like a basketball passing this ball of your spinning anxiousness into the field of this child. So the child had no worry or anything. They were just out doing whatever they were doing. And now they have this vibration of worry, which they didn't even ask for, which becomes a magnet for stuff that actually gets them worried and reinforces you, hey, I was right to worry about this. And we go as parents, I told you don't do this. This will happen and that'll happen. But, well, what if you just took that worry out? The kid hasn't asked for that to be in its field. Children do the reverse. And as I'm growing older, I see that happening from my children to me, which is, really worried about you traveling so much. And, we read about um, clots forming on your veins and stuff. I mean, I always say to them, well, that's great that you heard about it. Just keep it with you. It's nothing to do with me. I don't need your worry in my field. It's not something I've asked for, but I do acknowledge you care about me. So how about just rather than worry, just tell me that you love me. That's it.
What you think about me is none of my business.
Those are your thoughts. Maybe have a laugh about it. But the bottom line is when that worry thing begins, because it has no roots, it has to multiply very rapidly. What is it feeding on? It's feeding on your life force. What is life force? Whilst you're breathing, that life force is running through you, right? And that life force is running through you, and boom, it's feeding the worry. So you're now gasping for breath, and you're gasping for that sense of aliveness. And it starts to spin out of control very, very fast only because it has no roots, you know? And when you have a tap turned on, the water doesn't stop, it just gushes out. So, you've got the tap turned on, your life force is leaking away, and that leak is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger until you feel completely exhausted and shattered. with, you always just make me feel this way. You just put me through so much tension. Nobody puts you through anything. You've done it yourself. Our worries, our false expectations appearing real, turn on our tap that leaks our life force, not anybody else's. And they can't even turn it on. They don't even know where it is. Only we can. But once you understand that, fear is just false expectations appear, it literally is nothing. It shifts, So what you're releasing is that imagined threat. That imagined threat that you have attributed to fear. What gets restored is fear as information. Now, if you do feel fear, look, it comes. The main thing is it comes and goes. So if you do feel fear, the moment you will be amazed, the moment you start acknowledging the false expectations that are appearing real to you, just acknowledgement, not judgment, you're just acknowledging. Fear becomes information. And information is a very important pillar. Actually, I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Information is a part of a cycle where initially, you always begin that cycle with data. So by you acknowledging the false expectations appearing real, by you actually understanding that all of these things that were causing you to feel stopped or feel that you don't have the freedom, were in fact pieces of data that now starts to become information. When you are in the realm of information, you can do something about it. When you look at your false expectations appearing real list, you realize that many of those actually don't mean that much. So you can start, releasing them. That information starts to become knowledge when you realize that you do have the power and capacity to take proactive action with many of the things that you've listed. Now, once that knowledge becomes anchored, you're on that cycle of converting that knowledge into wisdom by implementing what you have learned about yourself and how you are able to overcome these false expectations appearing real and move forward. And the more you implement and see yourself in action implementing your own release, you actually start to restore that reconnection to you being this indestructible, eternal soul being. And that wisdom starts to become a knowing. And so the restoration is, in fact, restoration of that remembrance of you as the eternal, indestructible, unstoppable soul being having this human experience. That's the power of fear as information. And what is the consequence of that is you resurge. You resurge with courage. And as you resurge with courage, you become clarity in motion. Fear immediately loses its power. And it loses its power the moment it is listened to without obedience. Understand the nuance of these words. Listening doesn't mean becoming obedient to it. Listening simply is acknowledging with honor. Doesn't mean you're going to act on it. It's a very important phrase. Fear loses its power the moment it is listened to without obedience. And freedom begins when fear becomes a messenger, not a master. It never was a master. But we do give it the power of a master, false expectations appearing real. And in doing so, we activate this huge master that is the universe. The universe's life force starts to then, show us the false expectations becoming real. But you did that. You could, by the same token, get re-anchored into what is real. And what is real is, you are so, the fact that you have the freedom to think whatever you think, even if you may actually be in bondage, shows that freedom is the reality. And fear becomes a messenger, not a master. You can be your own plumber, fix that leak. In one of my previous sessions, I talked about that I was doing a salon in Maui, in Hawaii. And in that salon, there was this amazing guy. He was 103 years old. He really did not look that. He looked more like in his early to mid 50s. And then I find out that he had been in solitary confinement for 36 or 38 years in China. And this was a time where there was this change of regimes taking place between, the Chinese to the Japanese to the Russians, whatever that sequence was. And many of these prisoners in solitary confinement basically got lost. They got forgotten. So he landed up being there for 38 years. And for me, I was so humbled being in his presence, and seeing how vibrant and effervescent he was, and so clear in his thinking and talking, and did not wear glasses. There were no hearing aids. He was standing upright, So I said to him, I'm here to listen to you. Tell me, what were your first words when you got out? And he said that, when I got out, I was like completely bent over because it was very, very tight, the space that he was in. It's completely bent over. And it took me a while, but I could feel the warmth on my back and on my body. And the only words I could say was thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And that was not what I was expecting at all. And I said, what were you thanking? What were you thanking? And he said, I was thanking the sun, I was thanking the breeze, I was thanking the bees, I was thanking the birds I could hear. And I was thanking the sounds of all of these humans around me, that they all were there waiting for me to emerge. It was amazing, really amazing to hear him say that. Then I asked him, how did you, how did you actually live your life in that space? Was there ever anything to look forward to? Were you all looking forward to this freedom? And he was like really puzzled. He didn't know what I was asking. Because to him, he was still free. So he said, okay, they put me there, but they really, I was still, he didn't use the term free, I was still soaring high, he said. And he said there was so much to look forward to every day. And I'm like, okay, what was there to look forward to? That there will be light coming in. That was guaranteed. what was this light coming in? He says, once a day, a hand would come through this hole in the wall with a bowl of congee. And that was something to really look forward to, that light coming in. And that's when there is a flourishing quote that I have, which is when even in a tiny sliver of light, what it means is it's not dark anymore. What this guy created in those 38 years is there is a very deep science called I Ching that the Chinese have. And it was always something that was privy to a select few in China. During his 38 years, he actually translated the I Ching so that it became accessible. And then, many I Ching related books have been written but it originated from him sharing how he had unpacked this powerful body of science called I Ching. But that's a living, breathing example of freedom begins when fear, if it exists, is a messenger, not the master. His one sentence, when I said, well, what's that one sentence that you would say about your time in solitary confinement? And his thing was that, I am the master. I was the master and always remain so. And when you relate to yourself as the master, we are, each one of us is almost as we have the same scale and level of ancient wisdom within us as each other. So we do have our unique mastery. And when you own that, you are at the source of your life. Before I go to the second pillar, I just want to check in with you, David and Helene, if there's anything that you want to share, ask, clarify. And as you participate in this session, if you have any questions or sharing, just put it in the chat so we can bring it up. These are, we've started the journey of opening the portal of freedom. And at some point it will, once we go beyond the halfway mark. And that can sometimes take several days, several sessions. But over to you.
No,
And if there isn't, there isn't. I'll move to the second pillar.
I do want to say that I found that very interesting. You were talking about this gentleman and the I Ching, because I have some of his books here.
Yeah.
It was like Nelson Mandela when he was in prison, and then he came out and then became the president of South Africa. That was so powerful, and he must have been doing this exact thing when he
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
It's very powerful what he's saying, because it just shows that people and how many people are out running about,
Yeah.
having so much freedom and are imprisoned in their
They
own
are imprisoned.
in their own being.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And
true.
this,
So true.
thank you for
And
sharing.
again, we have the freedom to make us the prisoner,
Yes,
That's
So
yeah.
we are doing that to ourselves.
yeah. Yeah. So let's go to the next pillar, which is like even more surprising, I tell you. Okay. The second pillar is guilt. Oh, I can't stand it. I can't stand guilt. And it is a pillar to freedom. Can you imagine? So, what is guilt? It literally is borrowed burdens. So when I say guilt is a pillar of freedom, it becomes a pillar of freedom when you release these borrowed burdens. Again, guilt is such a manufactured emotion. And who does that manufacturing? You do. Nobody else can manufacture guilt and have you feel it. It is something that is self created. And then we own it and we become so attached to it. Initially, some things happened and we feel guilty about it. And okay, you can acknowledge it and move forward. But then we give our own proclamations and meanings to this guilt stuff. So it goes from data to information to knowledge. We practice it so much, it becomes wisdom. And then we keep feeling guilty until it becomes a knowing. And the knowing is really a meaning that you give to it. Now, for me, I hate this emotion. I just can't stand it. And I was a guilty single mom that chose to take my child's father away from him. A child's father who was actually aggressive and violent. So, so it was an action that was a protection mechanism for both of us. But I chose, at that time, I chose to harbor this borrowed burden of guilt. How do you release it? Guilt is rooted in conditioning, loyalty, or expectations. Mothers are meant to behave this way. I initially it was guilty because of the action I took, and now my child is not going to have his father in his life. And in terms of waking up to mother and father, he's not going to have that. And then after a while, I started feeling guilty at having to work and not actually be with my child. So here I am being this intelligent, full of vibrant vitality working mom that is connected to the goings on in the world and having the means for us to actually enjoy and live our life fully. Instead of actually celebrating that, I'm taking up the time that we do have together by having this guilt, depleting my life force. Another one of those leaks in our life forces. So it starts to become a conditioning. And then we actually become loyal to what we are guilty about. I'm not good enough as a mom. Became loyal to that belief even. That when people say, oh, you poor thing, you have to work and you have to be away from your child. I would accept that as my reality. But people can have their opinions, by the way, and they're totally free to have their opinions. And you can acknowledge that and feel grateful that they care enough to voice their opinions to you. It doesn't have to become your truth. So guilt is rooted in conditioning, loyalty, or expectations. So you just have to choose to release that. You just have to release being loyal to that, as opposed to, in my case, being loyal to the fact that I was a great mom, actually, provided so well for our life together. We literally lived in amazing places, traveled the world, and it's made me who I am. It's made my son who he is today. We can move a country. It's a very huge thing for most people. But we're like, yeah, we're excited about moving. And on Tuesday, all our stuff will get relocated. And there's great excitement all the way around about it. And we'll be living from suitcases for, until the 10th of April that we are here in Dubai. And everyone is excited as opposed to us feeling guilty about, oh, we're letting our friends down and stuff. No, they are celebrating with us. They have a holiday destination. And yes, there is emotion there, and we express that emotion to each other. So once you release guilt, as a borrowed burden, you can restore responsibility without self-punishment. As a mother, as a single mother, already there were a lot of demands on me, in terms of, and I happen to hold jobs and positions which had several people working for me. And then I became an entrepreneur. I don't have to answer to any bosses. But now it isn't that people are dependent on me. I'm actually feeding a number of families each month. Now I could weigh myself down with that guilt. And that would be self-punishment. You can choose to do that. But that also is an act of, freedom of choice. Not necessarily an empowering one, but you can choose to do that. But know that you are choosing it. Nobody's punishing you. Nobody wants to. So what you restore is that responsibility. Your ability to respond is what you restore when self-punishment disappears. And what resurges is that clean conscience, clear action. So really what I'm saying here is, what is guilt actually in terms of how we work with it as an emotion? It is often misplaced loyalty to outdated rules. I mean, I used to run this video in my head, as a child growing up, coming home from school and, mom making these hot chapatis and feeding us with such love, which I never had that opportunity to do with my son, because there would be a nanny at home. And I could have chosen a different life, and I chose not to. you know?
Manu, think
Yeah.
about the I think about the serenity prayer right here would be a good
Mm.
place to God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
important.
That's powerful, re-anchoring. Thank you for bringing that up. So this is again a very important statement that guilt is often misplaced loyalty to outdated rules. This is the way a mom should be or should not be. And therefore, I am not that, and therefore it is worthy of holding on to this emotion of guilt. But once you get that, how does guilt become a pillar of freedom? Can you imagine, you dissolve this propensity to self-punish and operate from responsibility, transforming your ability to respond to any situation at any time. That in itself brings forth this experience of freedom. So freedom arrives when you stop paying emotional debt that was never yours. That's why it is borrowed burden. There is a huge body of work that I do, and there are some of you who've done the journey into miracles with me. So you will recognize that some of these emotions that I'm talking about, fear and guilt, and a few others that are going to come up as pillars, they are in fact not emotions at all. They are in fact sergeant majors propelling us to live the calling of our soul. How does one work with guilt in that way? Once you get this logical mind stuff understood, that, it is a borrowed burden, it's not yours, you can have that tinge of an experience of guilt, but it doesn't have to become you. You can then start moving forward with that clean conscience and clear action, understanding that it's just your loyalty to some outdated rules that weren't even yours. They were created by other people. How you choose to apply your loyalty, that is under your remit. So guilt is a sergeant major that supports you to live the calling of your soul. How does it do that? There are many, many things that we have experienced guilt about from time to time. And we've still carried on, despite all those decades of certainly more than a decade of guilt. I still carried on, you know. So I looked at, well, the fact that I felt that guilt, I didn't implode within myself. I still moved forward. What became possible as a result of still moving ahead, despite the feeling of guilt? And I realized that actually guilt, every time I mustered up the power to move forward, and it was almost every day, sometimes several times a day during my mega guilt phase, it opened the doorway to a knowing that I am unstoppable. So fast forward many years later, every time this emotion of guilt came up, I took it that it was a reminder that I had somehow stopped being unstoppable. So guilt is showing up as a reminder. And when I shifted my mindset around my relationship to guilt, that emotional debt disappeared. And I experienced this amazing freedom with this fabulous companion who is a sergeant major, in fact, called guilt. And I realized that every time I am unstoppable and I have a knowing about it, there is no guilt of any kind. I keep moving forward, taking that next step next. So if it ever shows up, it's only a reminder that you're disconnected from what you know deep down, that you are unstoppable. I bring that back into my life and off I go. That's how guilt also is a very powerful pillar of freedom. Shall I continue? Or do you have?
So all of these things you're mentioning, they're all like stepping stones to greatness. They're
Yeah.
all clearing your
Mind.
your your beingness,
Yeah,
energy,
yeah,
you feel.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So Meena ji made a comment, I have done acknowledging of fear and still I'm holding the fear element. What could be the reason? Because you have acknowledged you're fearful about this, that, or the other. What you have not done is the acknowledging of the false expectations that are appearing real. For that fear to have a debilitating hold on you. You have not, you've probably done a little bit of a patchwork. I'm not asking you to, when you experience fear, I'm asking you to acknowledge false expectations that are appearing real, factually. The moment you start doing that and you start reading all of those expectations and start recognizing that they don't even exist, and we've made them our reality, that is where fear actually starts to lose its power. And Meenaji, you have done the journey into miracles. You also know what fear is as a sergeant major when it's reminding you as it's showing up. Go back to your dossier, your personal dossier, and see what fear is. And own that experience and see what emerges from there. So let's go to the next pillar. Yeah, this one is like even stronger than the other two. This third pillar is regret. Regret. Regret as a pillar. Another one, I mean, this was a big one for me. Guilt was strong. Fear was very slight. I never really had that much in terms of holding me back. Regret was the biggest. Lots of stuff, if only that and if only this and stuff would be there in my vocabulary in the past. So regret becomes a pillar as you complete the past. How do you release it? Regret is like a self-attack. It is a self-attack about what should have been. Release that self-attack of what should have been. Living in the what should have been is like living in the past. And so many of you, you've heard me talk about always be completing the past. Completing the past means you honor whatever has occurred, good, bad, ugly, or beautiful, and declare it complete, setting yourself free to move forward, taking the next step next. But if you do not complete the past and you keep moving forward, you've got this ever-growing burden, weight that you keep carrying as you're moving forward. And then you start using your energy to attack yourself on what should have been. And I would say, where regret set in for me, we really are not born with regret or guilt or fear. We are not born with any of those things. They're all manufactured realities. And for me, where regret took hold quite strongly was, I was 21 and I was in the taxi with a friend of mine, and we were actually traveling to my engagement party. And I just knew, in my heart, I knew that I was making a mistake. This engagement and the marriage that would follow should not occur. It was a mistake. And this guy, the person I was traveling with, was a very dear friend of mine, a male friend, and someone who always had my back. And he was the only one, actually, I said that I'm feeling I'm making a mistake. And his thing was, don't do it. This is just the engagement. If you do go ahead now, then the marriage is going to be inevitable. It'll be much harder to pull out. And I said, no, 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 there'll be too many people who will lose face, and there are too many people who'll be really, really upset and sad. And there's nothing wrong with the guy, but I just am feeling from inside he's not the right person for me. So my friend even said, well, don't worry about it. I will say that, um, I forced you to get married to me or something ridiculous like that. And anyway, I didn't entertain it. I did go ahead, get engaged, got married. And
Nope. From Mina. Sorry to interrupt. I have a comment from Mina. I have done acknowledging of fear, and still I am holding.
yeah, I already covered that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I still, so I go ahead, get married. And from the first year of marriage, he started hitting me. And then that domestic violence thing continued and escalated until 10 years later, I finally mustered up the courage to end that relationship and move on. During those 10 years, you can be rest assured, I had many, many, many times of major self-attack. I mean, come on, the guy is possibly physically hitting me, but the self-attack of regret, this should never have been, was far stronger. And it had quite a full spectrum impact, in terms of depleting my mental resilience, as well as, emotionally, it was quite difficult to continue. But that was me engaging in that self attack of regret, because that past, I had not completed it. I was still holding on to what could have been if had I not got engaged. Well, so what? I did get engaged. I did get married and I did experience it. You know? Why am I carrying on the self attack and impacting so many other areas of my life ongoingly? So it wasn't the domestic violence that occurred for 10 years, it was the domestic violence. It was the self abuse that I continued because of holding on to what could have been, what should have been. The moment I released that, I was free. And I was always free. I just reclaimed that. You know? Regret was another one. It is another sergeant major that supports us to live the calling of our soul. Despite those years of self attack, I kept moving forward. Despite that, shows my inner strength, shows that phenomenal grit, resilience, and ability to keep going that I hold within me. So once you release the self attack about what should have been, what gets restored? Compassion. Compassion for who you were with what you knew at that time. And what resurges? Wisdom. Integrated, not weaponized. But when you're in this regret of what should have been or could have been, you're not even close to, you're just like wallowing in data and information, but not moving forward into knowledge and wisdom and knowing. And that's why regret is also a pillar, because it integrates the wisdom. And when that wisdom is integrated, you operate from a space of inner knowing. Regret dissolves when past is completed, not replayed over and over. what should have been, what could have been, is that replay. But who has the remote control to replay this? You do. You are free. You always were, and you always will be. We've come to the end of our hour, so we are going to stop here today. I'm just going to bring you back in, David and Helene, to add or complete your words of wisdom.
So, say something? Well, I mean, it's.
Well, it's interesting because I had that same feeling before I got married the first time. I knew I was making a mistake, and but I thought also it would be so much harder to call everything off rather than go through it.
And you got a whole family.
And I got a whole family, and my family is fantastic. I mean, I love my children and my grandchildren, and I always think that if I hadn't gone through it, I wouldn't have.
So you got the lessons.
I got the lessons from all of it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
so this is so important, what you're talking about tonight, because no matter how much somebody really thinks that they have it together in life, there's always the fear, there's always the regrets, there's
Right.
always the guilt, there's always this or this little thing about, there's always something that rears its ugly head, if you will, you know, and slows you down. So that's why they say that most people are only using like maximum 15% of their of what they're capable of using, you know, the energy, because they have all these other filters and all these other things from the past happening. So this, what you're talking about, these pillars are vitally important to everyone. To everyone, I hope that it's that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I know it's going to be books, or you know, probably in several books already. It's very
So
powerful.
to be continued. We will continue with the other pillars next week, same time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Namaste.
you.
I think our meeting. Thank you.
Hi, Mary Malloy.
Hi.
Mynoo, everybody, please forgive me. It's 2:30. On my text said 2:30, so I set my alarm, and I'm late because
No
it's.
worries. That must be a mistake at our, because it's changing of the clocks and stuff. Sometimes we've
Yeah,
got
I'm so sorry. I
timing
got
wrong.
myself a wake up, everybody. I just heard little enough to hear your lovely voice, and hello to everybody. Sorry to be late. Apologies. Hello, David and Helen and everybody. So there I am. Here I am, but sending love from Ireland, and I'm an hour late, but I'm with us all the way.
Love from New
Awesome.
York.
Thank you, everyone. We will complete it.
Thanks, Mynoo. God bless.
Thank you. Bye.
God bless. Thank you.